Let's take a minute to examine the question, why do we tend to forget things? And there are a number of reasons, potential reasons, why people forget things. One, and the most basic reason, is inattention. If people don't pay attention, they tend to forget because technically they never process the information to begin with. I have to admit, I am terrible at names, and especially when introduced to someone for the very first time. When I say hello to them and they tell me their name, oftentimes I just don't pay attention, and all of a sudden, 5 seconds later, I can't think of their name because I never really processed it to begin with. So, the number one factor, the number one reason, if you're paying attention right now, you can remember this. The number one reason why people tend to forget things is that technically we never had them to begin with. We just don't pay attention. Second reason, and this is also very, very common, is we tend to have very poor retrieval cues. Now, in one of our other screencasts, we talked about how to study, and we talked about cues, and a cue is essentially a clue. Okay, so once again, a cue is just a clue to help us trigger our memory of a particular event. So, as I said before, what you need to do as a student is you need to try and remember as many different ways of accessing material as you possibly can. So create a variety of cues that allow you to remember certain material. A lot of times people don't do that. Students don't do that. So if you just listen to a teacher and a teacher talks about a concept and then moves on, you don't have a personal example to help you remember that particular concept. And very oftentimes you're going to forget what example that the teacher used because you just haven't either didn't pay attention or didn't process it fully. So try and make as many cues as possible. Now, another thing that can cause us to forget things is we have interference from other material. There's two types of interference. There's what we call retroactive interference, and then there's proactive interference. Retroactive interference, easiest way to remember this is when you see the word retro, you think of old. Well, retroactive interference is having problems remembering old material. Now, if you're having problems remembering old material, that means that the new material is getting in the way. So, for example, let's say you can't remember. Well, let's talk about, for example, math. Okay, in math, math teachers are really good at coming in on a Monday morning and they go through a 25-step method of doing a particular problem, and then they give you homework and you go home Monday night and you practice the 25-step method and you learn that particular method. But then you come in Tuesday and they say, oh, well, we're going to use this theorem or this property. And now by using that particular method, they can cut it down to 8 steps. So now instead of doing 25 steps, you're doing 8 steps. They give you homework, you learn that method on Tuesday. Wednesday, you come back in and they tell you about some other kind of theorem or property, and now they cut the process down to 3 steps. So you do homework that night. Well, sure enough, on Friday, the very first thing that they do, the very first question on the test, using Monday's method, please solve the following. Well, you struggle because now you know how to get the answer. You can get the answer in 3 steps, but you can't remember the 25-step method to solving it to be able to answer the first question on the quiz because what you've had since then is getting in the way. So again, that is where New material is getting in the way of the old, causing you to have trouble remembering the old material. Retroactive interference, you're having trouble remembering the old material. Proactive interference is the opposite. This is when you have trouble remembering something new because something in the past is getting in the way. So as the little animation is showing, calling your new girlfriend by your old girlfriend's name, not a good idea. So, but that sometimes happens because people will have something stuck in their head and they can't remember the new material. They can't remember, the new, whether it be a name or a new procedure or whatever the case might be. That's called proactive interference, and again, very common. Another reason why sometimes we believe people forget things is through repression. Now, Freud talked about this. This is one of Uncle Sigmund's ideas here, is he believed that technically we never forget anything. We just simply sometimes push it down into the depths of the unconscious mind. So repression occurs not by choice. Okay, it's not like I actively try and do anything to repress material. But if I've been in a situation that was, let's say, problematic for me, or it was a trauma, or something of that nature, well, then my mind sometimes will tend to push that material down into the unconscious mind. I repress it, okay, without trying. I unconsciously repress it down into the unconscious mind. So it's not something I actively try and do. This is just something that occurs occasionally. And that's one of Freud's explanations for why we tend to forget things. And the last thing that we'll talk about here is amnesia. And amnesia is simply when you can't remember certain things. You lose particular memories. Now, the thing about it, amnesia can be caused by a variety of things. It can be caused by a physical problem with the brain. It can be caused by a disease or anything. There's a variety of physical reasons why people sometimes will experience amnesia. Most of the time in psychology, when we talk about amnesia, we are talking about what's called psychogenic amnesia, or in other words, something that originates with the psyche. In other words, we're talking about some kind of a psychological issue that causes people to lose their memory. And oftentimes that can be caused by stress, very high levels of anxiety. Anytime somebody's under a lot of stress or anxiety, a lot of times they can experience memory problems or tend to be forgetful about various things. So those are very common. Other causes of amnesia would be, for example, drug or alcohol usage, things of that nature that can cause that. But again, amnesia can be caused by those things. It could be caused by a physical injury, like a car accident or something like that, where a person receives a blow to the head. There's a variety of reasons why somebody could experience amnesia. Okay, so here's our reasons again for various reasons why people tend to forget things. The number one factor, the number one thing as to why people oftentimes will forget things is simply poor attention or poor retrieval cues. That's number one.